I'm always looking for ways to show my cat how much I love her. And with Fancy Feast gems, I can pamper her whenever I want with a savory gravy on top of a gourmet mousse pâté. The pyramid shape makes serving simple, so all I have to do is peel and plate to make mealtime feel extra fancy. And with 2 entrees in every pack, it's easy to turn every day into the extraordinary. Fancy Feast gems.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Nerding Out on Neurodiversity, the podcast for all things neurodivergence. I'm Dr. Matt Zakreski, clinical psychologist and professional speaker, and I'm happy to be your host through the wild trails of the neurodivergent world.
And I'm Jake Noonan, educational coach and humanities teacher, your co-host and producer, and I'm thrilled to help share the stories and the experiences of wonderful people in the world of neurodiversity.
We're really excited for today's guest, which we are going to say a lot because we're always really excited about every guest we get. So let's get into it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Nerding Out on Neurodiversity. I'm your host, Dr. Matt Zakreski, clinical psychologist, published author, professional speaker, podcast host. I probably should put that in there. And wearer of many hats. With me, as always, is the Robin to my Batman, Mr. Jake Noonan. Say hi, Jake.
Hey, everybody. Great to be here again, as always. Dr. Matt, we do definitely have to put podcast host in there at some point.
It feels right.
We just keep adding to it, so.
I mean, because wearer of many hats is like a nice descriptor, but we really want to give him some meat on the bone, right? It's like, what is the many hats? And we're going to tell them the many hats. Who knows how long it'll be in 2 years.
The whole episode.
The whole episode is just me listing my CV. It's just like the worst, like navel gazy, like, oh God, we're never gonna do that. Fans, we promise you, well, if we get to that point, you have my permission to boycott us. That'd be fun. So we have an awesome guest with us today. Sydney is somebody that I connected with via social media. Found out immediately, I was like, oh, this is a like-minded person. So I think we need to have you on the podcast to talk about what you do. So Sydney, why don't you introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little bit about you?
Yeah, so like Matt said, my name's Sydney. I am a licensed therapist, and I primarily work with clients from more marginalized communities. I'm doing EMDR, which is a form of trauma therapy. I'm also someone who is diagnosed with OCD and connected with Matt because I read his new book that released yesterday. So congratulations, by the way. And I had never related really to the term neurodivergent before until reading the Neurodiversity book. I knew that OCD was considered neurodivergence, but the things that I would see on social media or even just in studying things through my work, it wasn't something I related to. But in your book, I had 192 annotations, so quickly realized I do connect with that. So yeah, that's a little bit about me and what I do.
192. Damn.
Yes.
When we do the reprinting, I'm going to quote you on the back cover. 192 annotations. Sydney Pruett.
Yeah.
I am flattered and honored to hear that, and that is just so you guys know. I didn't have Sydney on here just so she could talk about how awesome my book is. We're not quite that transparent. What I'd love to do is take a little bit of a deeper dive into the concept of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
As mental health professionals, I'm sure it absolutely grinds your gears when people use our clinical terms incorrectly. And as someone who's a member of the trauma community and the OCD community, these are two words that just get bandied about like, oh gosh, that was so traumatic. In my head, I'm like,
mm-hmm.
but but was it? Because
Right, exactly.
people are like, oh, I'm so OCD. I have to put my shoes in a very particular spot. I'm like, that is the icing on the cupcake of OCD.
Mhm.
That might be the sprinkle on the icing of the cupcake of OCD. So if you would take, like, what does trauma really mean? Like, as a practitioner of this, like, what is it you look for?
So essentially, I tell clients that I do have a more general idea of what trauma is. I think a lot of people think it's, losing a loved one who is very close to you, or maybe seeing combat in war. And those things obviously can be traumatic. But trauma is anything that causes a long-term negative impact that impacts your brain in a way that starts affecting other areas. And so sometimes our trauma is beliefs that we picked up about ourselves or about the world, even in childhood, that may not stem from a significant event, but it kind of spiraled into changing how we do things now. And so with EMDR, we're able to tackle those beliefs and all of the areas they impact rather than just specifically tackling one specific incident like we might if it's a specific trauma.
And I love this idea that trauma stems, at least in part, from some of the views we're socialized to have, right? I think a lot about the just world hypothesis, right? Like, everything should be fair and things will work out,
Mm-hmm.
and how that inflates our expectations to a sense that it can absolutely drive us towards success, but also leaves us more vulnerable for having that rug yanked out from underneath us.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that I've been thinking about a lot recently when it comes to neurodivergence in my own life. I'm what you would consider, I guess, thrice exceptional, which feels braggy, but really it's just a way to say my brain and my body make it really hard for me to do things that look easy. So I was a gifted child. I have OCD, and I also have a lot of invisible disabilities. So with my health, it kind of goes along with this idea of passing. I look, quote unquote, like a normal person, whatever that is. I don't really believe in normal, but things are much harder for me because of how my brain and body function. So, like you were saying, with this idea of a just world, I grew up with this idea that we have rules that you're supposed to follow. And if you follow the rules, you'll get what you're working towards. Everything will work out well. Obviously, that's not the case. And so a lot of my trauma kind of stems from that, of learning I can't trust my own body. Sometimes I can do everything right and everything still goes wrong.
And thank you for sharing, because I think there's a lot of people out there who are probably sitting with similar stories and may not have those words for them.
Mm-hmm.
I often think about this in terms of trauma is personal defeats sent through the lens of sort of larger societal problems, right? And, you work with marginalized communities, right?
Mm-hmm.
I often open a lot of the talks I give in the DEI space of, like, I'm the most privileged person in this room, right? I'm a white, cisgender, heterosexual male with a doctorate,
Mm-hmm.
and all of my disabilities are invisible like yours, right? You can't really tell I have ADHD,
Mm-hmm.
at least not at first. And then it becomes very clear. Not a word from you, Jake.
I'll stay quiet. It's fine.
Right. I check a lot of those privilege boxes. So the world has been more just to me than it as to your average person because of the amount of privilege I carry. Now, I work hard to utilize that privilege to, to knock down those walls and make a safer space for more people. But how do you think being a member of a marginalized community factors into broader experiences of trauma?
Yeah, it hugely does. Like you were saying, I go over privilege with most of my clients. I talk about ways that we are privileged because, like you, I'm cisgender, I am white. I recognize those are things that have advantaged me in some ways. But we also talk about our disadvantages. And so while I love being a female, that has caused disadvantages in some areas. My physical health and disabilities have caused disadvantages in a lot of areas. And so talking about even those intersectionalities that, if you as a white male went into a doctor for the same issues I was having, you're far more likely to be taken seriously. We talk about that in the lens of race, ethnicity, religion. I work with a lot of people from the Two-Spirit LGBTQ plus community, people who have gone through a lot of religious trauma or abuse situations, and how they see their own trauma is highly impacted by the communities that they're in. A lot of times when I do consultations, I'll ask clients, have you experienced any form of trauma? And a lot of them say no. But once we get to working together, they say, oh, I have a whole list. I have all these things that have happened to me that have caused such a huge impact. But because it's normalized in their area, or because they're seen as different or wrong, they don't see it that way. They see it as they're the problem.
that's a great example of this individual challenges through societal structures.
Mhm.
I'm also a person with religious trauma. I had a great relationship with the church growing up, but got to a point in high school, college where it's like, I do a lot of musical theater. I have a lot of gay friends. I have a tough time reconciling my priest saying gay is bad. And also these people who are my friends and loved ones and people who would take a bullet for me. How do I reconcile those two things? So, of course, I talked to the priest about it. And he's like, well, that's just the devil. And I'm like, but like, I don't think it could be that simple. I don't think it is that simple because isn't the whole idea of this God is love?
Mhm.
And, they didn't excommunicate me, but there was let's say, a chilling effect that occurred.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, even as like a 17, 18-year-old, like, there's something not right, something fishy about this. But at the same time, like, this was me advocating on behalf of others, right? So the trauma
Right.
glanced off me, as it were.
Mhm.
It wasn't me saying, by the way, I'm in love with this dude and I still want to go to this church. And then be like, there's the word that we're not going to say on this podcast, right? So I'm not so much into therapy trauma bonding. I think it's a thing that, people certainly do. But like there are times where people share their trauma with me and I'm like, man, I've got nothing that is that deep in the pool. Right? I'm splashing around in the shallow end over here. And these kids are like putting on like the old school dive helmets and just descending to the depths.
Yeah.
How do you as a therapist maintain your appropriate clinical distance from those kind of trauma narratives? Like how do you not get sucked in?
Yeah. Kind of what you're describing, I talk to clients a lot too about secondhand trauma. I say it's kind of like secondhand smoking. You may not be an active smoker, but if you were in close quarters with someone who is, it can impact you in a similar way. And so even though you weren't directly experiencing those things, your loved ones were, and that caused an impact for you. And that can happen in therapy too. I have times where clients will share things that are really heavy, and it's hard for me to just, oh, it's 5 o'clock, I don't care anymore. Obviously, it doesn't work that way. And so you have to have that self-care, that distance, those professional boundaries. But that's one of the reasons why I love EMDR. I don't know how familiar you are with EMDR, but essentially it's a form of therapy that uses your eye movements. And in doing that, clients can share with me if they want, verbally out loud, but we do processing on a neurological level and they don't have to share things. And that has helped me tremendously with having those professional boundaries because I don't have to hear the details of what they're experiencing. They're still processing it the exact same way. They're still thinking through it, but it's not something that I have to know all the details.
I don't think I've ever heard EMDR described in that way. So let's unpack that a little further because I'm not sure if everybody is familiar with that term.
Yeah.
So how does just sort of give me the broad strokes of a general EMDR session?
So how I typically describe it when I'm pitching it to clients, because it sounds like weird hippie stuff that I'm just making up as I go along, but there's a structure and a science to it. And so with typical talk therapy, it can take, 8 to 10 sessions to start seeing real change. With EMDR, it typically takes about 3. So obviously it doesn't heal all your trauma in 3 sessions, especially if you have a lot of complex trauma, but you start seeing those changes quickly because it changes things neurologically. It's an instantaneous, permanent change. When we do EMDR, it uses your eye movements. And so if you've ever seen somebody who is sleeping and dreaming, their eyes dart back and forth, and that's their brain processing things. Your dreams sometimes don't make sense, but it's your brain categorizing, filing things away, keeping what's important and getting rid of what's not. But obviously, you don't get to choose what you dream about. And so when we do EMDR, we'll pick a belief or an event, something that is causing trauma for you. And that's our starting place. And then I'll guide you either in eye movements or tapping. I typically do tapping because my clients are virtual and it's hard to regulate how far those eye movements are virtually. But as you're tapping, your brain starts to process those things and it changes the neurons in your brain. It changes how things are filed and categorized. One thing that I hear often is, this is random, but this is the thought that came up. And as we keep processing, they say, oh, that's connected because of the fear of control or a similar feeling of embarrassment or even just tension in my shoulders. I got that in both situations. So your brain filed things together, but you didn't realize the connection. And that's where that trauma comes from. It kind of spider webs out into all these different areas, all connected by the one core belief.
I love that because I've sat through a couple of EMDR sessions just, in grad
Mhm.
school and watching the lights and watching, the narratives. And I found it does look a little weird. It looks a little hippy dippy,
Yeah.
like the flashing lights will cure your trauma. That's
Yeah.
sounds like something you'd see on TV at 2 a.m, right? Like,
Hmm.
but this idea of intentionally bringing things up to create a neural reframing of that incident.
Hmm.
I mean, we're talking about biochemical catharsis, right? I mean, we're really like rewiring the brain to connect new pathways to make new emotional experiences around these things that dinged or dented our brain. So
Hmm.
the science behind this is really cool. And Jake knows that I'm very guilty of this. When we have a guest coming on, I pull up a little file and I do a lot of research. And my EMDR I don't know. Hold on, I'm going to check actually. 57 links on. It's not quite 192 annotations,
Yeah, not quite there.
right? But because I was like, man, oh, there's this. Oh, and then there's this. Oh, and then there's this.
Hmm.
I just think that's really neat. And I think it sounds like it's a little bit protective for you as the therapist, but it sounds like it's also insulating to the client. Like it gives them a space to
Yeah.
feel this more safely.
Hmm. It truly does. And it's been very helpful for me in branching out with the kind of clients that I see. I'm actually licensed in New Jersey as well. I'm licensed in New Jersey, Utah, Missouri, and Oklahoma. So being able to help in areas where I might not have specific knowledge. So a lot of my clients are people who are leaving the Mormon community, for example. I don't have a ton of knowledge about the Mormon religion. And so I learn as I go with clients, but a lot of it I don't have to know because with EMDR, I don't need to have that specific information or details. I can still be helpful without that knowledge.
Jake, I've been talking a lot. Do you want to take the next question?
Yeah, so sorry, I've been listening a lot because it's fascinating. But there's a question that came up for me that I was a little bit of backstory. In college, I remember hearing about things like EMDR, like adjacent, where it's the the fringe aspects where it's like, oh, if you take a ping pong ball and cut it in half and put it on your eyes and go to sleep with like the lights on in a specific way, like everything will be perfectly fine and you'll be able to like think differently. And all those like out there kind of not like weird because they do strangely work because it's along the same lines, but those like, oh, you go on TikTok, you go on Instagram, and there's this person who's like, I did this thing and it worked really well for me, and here I'm gonna push it everywhere, and then it explodes and becomes like viral.
Mhm.
I'm curious, what's your perspective and your experience with the people who or the clients who come to you and they're maybe they've experienced things like that, or they're like, I saw this one thing on Instagram and it sounds fascinating. I think it might work for me. Like,
Yeah, I could probably do a whole podcast on the benefits and the evils of social media and pop psychology because I love that it's making psychology and therapy more accessible and normalized. But I hate that there's so much misinformation out there. And like you said, a lot of anecdotal experience that maybe something did help one person, but that doesn't mean the research and the science is there. So I was very much that person when I heard about EMDR back in grad school. I thought, that's not for me. That's not the type of therapy that I want to do. Same thing, it kind of reminded me of like hypnotherapy and things that may have good grounds, but didn't seem for me. Because like I said, I'm very structure, rules. I like to have a plan and a process. But going through EMDR as a client, I realized it does have a structure, it does have a plan and a process, and the science is there. And so when we first started, I told my therapist, I don't know that this is going to work for me. This isn't really, my thing, but it was so hugely helpful and it helped me connect things that I never would have thought were filed together in my brain. Going through it with clients too. I had clients that I worked with for a year or two prior to getting trained in EMDR, and some of them were hesitant to get started. But I said, let's just give it a try. If you don't like it, obviously, you know my style of therapy other than this, so we can go back to that. I've never had a client go back to typical talk therapy. Every single one has stayed with EMDR. The only one I've ever had that was hesitant said he didn't think it was working. And when I asked why, he said, well, I'm noticing these moments where I'm having the same issue, but I'm not acting any differently. And I said, well, EMDR is not mind control. You're becoming more aware because of the EMDR. It's giving you the opportunity to make a different choice, but you still have to make that choice. And after that, he was like, okay, yeah, it's definitely working then.
I had a client very similarly. We did a long phobia protocol around his fear of flying.
Mhm.
And at one point he looked at me, he's like, this isn't working. I'm still afraid. I'm like, you are absolutely still afraid. But right now you're standing in an airplane. And when we started this journey, I showed you a picture of an airplane and you had a panic attack. So like, it's not the lack of emotion.
Mhm.
It's the different choices we can make when presented with those emotions, right? And I think that's fundamentally what the work we all do is about.
Right.
If you freak out every time you have a 3-page paper to do, Jake's going to help you rewire those experiences in a way that's like, hey, I might not like this 3-page paper, but I can do it.
Yeah, yeah. And recognizing those changes too, like you were saying, what I love about EMDR is at the beginning of each processing session, we start with a negative event or belief, and we rate how disturbing that is on a scale of 0 to 10. And then we have a positive belief that we're working towards, and we rate how true that feels. So I tell my client it's not how true it logically is, but how true does it feel when you think about it. And at the end of the session, we re-rate those numbers. And so you can see even in the span of, an hour, however long we're meeting together, how those numbers change, even in that short time span.
Can you share a little bit about like a specific experience with, especially like using those numbers systems and seeing like a client who might be like, everything's at a 1, it's terrible right now. And then at the end of the session, they're like, everything's a 9, I'm feeling so much better.
Yeah, it's kind of the opposite actually. So 10 would be like, this is the worst I've ever felt.
Okay.
So I've had clients who have come in and something happened this week and they're at a 9 or a 10. They're, crying or very volatile in session. And then once we get started with the processing, it'll come down to maybe a 2. And not every session is like that. Some sessions you don't see much change. But in those moments, typically it's because they recognize, okay, I'm having this strong reaction because of something else that happened. Kind of the example I give. I dated a guy who, not a great guy. When he went out of town, I knew he was doing things that he shouldn't be with people he shouldn't be with. So my current partner is amazing. No doubts about him, fully trust him. But when he says, hey, I'm going to go camping with the guys, my initial reaction is to be angry. And that's an instant response. That's something my body does. It's triggered by similarity, my partner going out of town. But I recognize now I'm not mad at him. He can go camping. There's nothing wrong with that. But I have to control my body's response. So through the EMDR, I'm able to recognize the trigger, recognize what my body's doing, calm myself down, and have a reaction that's rational.
And how many people are listening to this and they just had a huge light bulb moment? Like, my kids have been watching all the Despicable Me movies recently.
Mhm.
So I heard light bulb in Gru's voice, light bulb, right? So it's like, I'm like, well, it's just a regular light bulb. It doesn't have to be a Gru light bulb, but neither here nor there. I mean, it's amazing how our trauma can pull us into these, I don't call them self-fulfilling prophecies in relationships. I call them self-fulfilling whirlpools, because
Mhm.
you were hurt by your old partner. Those emotional scars linger, and you play out that drama with your new partner, even though your new partner has nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
But then your new partner's like, yo, Sydney will not get off my ass. I am going to having long conversation with this park ranger. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then your brain tells you, see, no one can be trusted, right?
Yeah, yeah. And with EMDR too, I think it has been so helpful in healing some of those things so that I'm not as reactive. In the beginning, that was kind of the trigger was, do I trust this person? Do I not? And now I'm able to heal from those past things so that I, first of all, don't have as strong of a reaction. But second, I recognize when I do and can do something about it that's a little bit more rational. One of the things that you said in your book that I tell clients all the time is your emotions are always valid. People don't seem to get that. I shouldn't be angry. That's what I hear a lot. I shouldn't feel scared. And I say, should is just kind of a made up potential. It doesn't exist. You are angry. You are scared. That's okay. It might not be rational, but it's okay. And so we work on your response to your emotion, not trying to pretend the emotion doesn't exist or get rid of the emotion.
And I thank you for highlighting that. That's a thing that I have struggled with, like a lot of things, right? It's easier to say to a client than it is to believe yourself.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh, my client's emotions are all valid. No, my emotions are wrong. I shouldn't be angry. I shouldn't be scared. I shouldn't be overwhelmed. Blah, 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 blah. But then there's this like, right, we have to practice what we preach.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We have to anchor that in those experiences, because not only do we model that for our clients when we do, but also the better we are with our stuff, the more present and capable we are to meet the needs of our clients.
Yeah.
So, Sydney, tell me a little bit more about marginalized communities and how that plays into your work. Like, what is you used the word intersectionality before, right?
Mm-hmm.
How does that kind of intersectionality impact your clinical work, impact like how you approach a client? Because we know that, I mean, even using our practice as an example, like we're drawing from a very particular swath of society,
Yeah.
right? And I really believe that therapy shouldn't just be for the 1%, right? So what are the frameworks and considerations look like when you're working with a marginalized person?
So there's a broad spectrum, there's the individual, and then there's the whole systemic mind frame. So when we go through trauma, obviously PTSD can occur. And so with trauma, that is something that can cause a form of neurodivergence that is not something you're born with. However, when you have somebody who has been through, complex trauma or multiple traumas, and they change that neurologically, that can get passed down through generations. And we start seeing things that generational trauma that's behavioral, things that we observe and pick up and pass on, but also things that are just in our DNA. So kind of a basic example, both my parents have autoimmune issues. I have autoimmune issues. Those are heavily linked to trauma as well as how our body carries trauma. So being a female, oftentimes we carry our trauma and anxiety in our GI system, abdomen, all of that. Lots of endometriosis in my family as well for the females. And so those are things that may be linked to trauma, maybe things that are just genetically passed down that cause trauma, but all of that is kind of a system. Same thing when it comes to other forms of intersectionality. If you are experiencing trauma, you're constantly on the alert. If you are constantly being othered, if you're being made to feel like you are always in danger because of how you look or who you are or who you love, you're constantly on alert and your body doesn't get that chance to calm down. That can cause health issues in and of itself. That's something that we can work on as well with EMDR is having less of those physical reactions to trauma, to others' reactions and responses, but we can't change other people's reactions and responses. And so even if we work on healing what you've been through and how you react to it, if you're still in a dangerous situation, that's something that's hard to recover from. So yeah, lots of different ways that trauma causes an impact physically and systemically.
And I would guess that with marginalized communities having fewer resources or less access to resources, if we want to put it that way, that's impacting the way we can heal the body, which then means that we're feeling those traumas, we're feeling those hits harder. I mean, like you can't rest and relax, you can't calm down if you're working 2 jobs in a community where jobs are few and far between and resources are scarce.
Yeah, Oklahoma specifically is pretty much bottom of the list in a lot of areas, education, mental health, healthcare in general. And so accessibility, like you said, is a huge thing, but I think also each community and the beliefs there impacts the kind of care that you get. I've had a lot of clients who come to me from, Oklahoma or Missouri saying, I'm a queer person and my last therapist told me that my lifestyle was wrong. Obviously something as a therapist you're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to judge. You're not supposed to put your input in, but it happens all the time. Same thing with Utah. I get a lot of clients say, I can't find a therapist who's not part of the Mormon church. I think that's one of the benefits of being licensed in different areas is I'm able to help people who can't find that kind of healthcare in their area. But again, with social media, I think it's great that it's becoming more talked about, more normalized to get therapy. Doesn't mean that it's accessible or affordable or even available to a lot of people.
Accessible, affordable, and available. I mean, that's what it is, right? I can't tell you how many kids I see who, I was talking about this on another podcast recently, like the amount of kids who reach out to me directly now, like a 16-year-old will jump in on my website, like, hey, I need therapy for this reason. And I think back to when I was 16 and be like, and both of my parents were therapists growing up. So like I grew up with this. I was like, therapy? That's for crazy people.
Yeah.
And now it's just so much more normalized. And I often say, like, I don't really care what gets a client to me. It's my job to keep them there once they get there. So if kids are like, oh, I saw on TikTok I have dissociative identity disorder, I'm like, you almost certainly don't.
Exactly.
Like, it would be very unlikely that you do, but let's talk about it because I want to know more about that. And whatever is going on, we're treat it will help you find a better path.
Yeah, and I do tend to rely more on symptomology than providing a label for it. I think sometimes that label can be helpful because it can help you to get more information. But like you said, I have so many young people, especially now, who come to me saying, I have this very specific diagnosis. And I say, oh, okay, who diagnosed you? And they're like, well, I watched a TikTok. And even if you relate to somebody on TikTok who does have that diagnosis, there's lots of different reasons for it. It's kind of like, if I say I have a cough, sore throat, I'm achy, chills and fever, I might have the flu, I might have COVID, I might have the cold. There's lots of things it could be. My symptoms are important and getting to the root cause is important, but I can't just come into you and say this is what it is based on those symptoms. It's the same for mental health. You might have lack of focus, anxiety, all these different symptoms, and that could be anxiety, total anxiety disorder, could be PTSD, could be OCD, could be lots of different things. So we look at the symptoms, we treat the symptoms. If a label comes out of that, great. But if not, we're still treating the issue.
Jake, you've got your thinking face on.
I do. I have a question that it's like everything you've been talking about is coinciding for me because my background's more in education rather than psychology.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing that you're in Oklahoma, knowing everything that's been going on with the education system there, and then what like the superintendent and everybody's been pushing, and the marginalized communities that you work with, I'm curious, like, do you see any of the political overlap in your conversations, in your meetings with clients, in like what they bring up, what they talk about, their general fears, and like, is that almost like ramping up, or is that kind of the same as it's always been? And it's
I think Oklahoma specifically, for those who aren't aware, our superintendent is heavily pushing banning books. He is saying that the Bible has to be taught in schools. He sent out a video recently of him. It's a 90-second video of him praying, and he said he required it to be shown to all students, teachers, parents. And so it does create this culture of, is this a place that I want my kids to be educated? So I have had some clients who are saying, what do I do here? Do I homeschool my kids? Do I let them go, but teach them that we do or don't believe these things? I think in general, with the states that I am in, I would say maybe in New Jersey excluded, but the other three are highly, highly conservative. And so I have a lot of clients who, during election time, we're just talking about this culture of fear. And it goes beyond political beliefs. It goes into, am I safe to exist? Is my relationship still going to be legal? Am I going to be physically safe? We can get into abortion, women's rights, all kinds of different things. But in these states that I work in, there is a huge culture of fear and wondering if your existence is going to be safe or valid.
And have you seen that, like, from the first day, let's say you started, to now, have you seen that like progressing like a lot, or is it kind of just been about the same?
Yeah, I would say it's huge in the last few years, especially. So I graduated in 2017, I believe, is when I first started doing therapy. So in that 7-year period, there's been a lot more political conversations, a lot more of that just generalized fear. I think the pandemic had a huge part in that as well. But even prior to the pandemic, I worked in schools. I started out working with kids. And so there's fears of school shootings, of, things that I never even considered when I was a kid. Those are things that have definitely ramped up in the last 7 years.
Dr. Matt, now you have something on your mind.
I'm just trying to figure out what I can say about the Oklahoma superintendent that doesn't get this podcast canceled. Words and feelings, and we're processing, and I mean, I think if there was a gift that came out of the pandemic, right, it was normalizing telehealth, normalizing seeing people from all over. I mean, we serve kids from basically all states except California. California, get on board with this, change your rules. We would love to help you. We know you have a lot of therapists there, but they're all in Los Angeles County. So come on, work with us here. But it's one of those things where, like, when you serve a kid from rural Montana or Wyoming and they're 2E, they're 3E, but you're really just saying, like, I'm creating a space, even if it's over Zoom for an hour a week, where you matter and who you are isn't something to be debated on CNN, right? It's an inalienable aspect of your being, and we're going to honor that and we're going to support that. Sometimes people ask me, like, why do you advocate so hard for the LGBTQ community? You're not LGBTQ. I'm like, you're right. I'm not. The only hat I can wear there is an ally hat.
Mm-hmm.
But fundamentally, our job is to help people and give them the tools to navigate a world that feels increasingly unsafe, if not hostile.
Right. And to your point with being an ally, I get the same thing a lot of times as, have you just not come out yet? Nope, I'm straight. I just love people and I think they should be allowed to love whoever they want. And I think people don't seem to get why that's important. As an ally, it's not about me, but it's about me saying other people are important, even if they're different from me. And I can elevate those voices so that other people can see that. A lot of times people think we don't need to listen to someone if they are different because it doesn't impact them. And that's why it's so important. I actually write poetry and have been published and done performances and things like that. And I had someone tell me, your poetry is not for me because you write about women's issues. Like, that's why it is for you. Like, women get it. We already know. That's the whole point, is I'm trying to spread awareness of these issues to people who don't normally listen to somebody because they're a woman, which apparently was that guy.
Apparently was that guy.
Yeah.
Damn. I want to say this again. I'm going to try really hard not to heap this because I want it to be your words. In fact, no, we'll just say it this way. Sydney, could you say that again, why that matters?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's just there's so many people who it's an echo chamber. We listen to people who get it, people who are like us. And I think that's why I connected with your book so much, is because I thought, okay, this is me, I get it. And that's great to have that. But there's so many people that we don't understand and that we never will if we don't just talk to them. It's not about me saying, I'm right and my way is the best and only way, and you're wrong and you need to be like me. It's about seeing there's so many different experiences of how we can live the life that we're given, and all of them are valid, whether you like it or not. And if you don't like it, don't act that way, but don't try to change someone else's actions.
I love that. I always say that we don't do our work for the people who already get it.
Mm-hmm.
We do our work for the people who would really like to get it, or are capable of getting it, right? I put that flag out because anybody who knows me knows I'm an ally. I put my flag out that if you're in my neighborhood and you need a safe place to go amongst all the Trump signs, well, there's at least one house you could knock on the door and probably be safe.
Mm-hmm.
And if that is all I can do in my time on this big spinning ball, then so be it, right? That's what I'm going to do. So this is a lighter anecdote that I think demonstrates this point. So I was speaking at one of our national conferences for supporting the emotional needs of the gifted, and they have a teen program. So the teens are doing their thing, and I popped down there because I had a couple of clients in the room just to say hi. And one of my clients, he was like, "Hey, do I have to wear my 3E pin?" He's like, "It's kind of weird, right? Everybody here is already gifted. Do they need to know?" And I'm like, well, they don't need to know, but it's a way for you to claim that part of your identity. But vitally, it also shows other people that you have an element of your personality that could be a safety for them, right? And I was like, like we always talk about with Lord of the Rings, right? Like the beacons are lit. And from the back corner of the room, this kid stands and goes, "Gondor calls for aid!" And I was like, see, it's that kid.
Yeah.
That kid needed to know you existed. I was like, we couldn't have planned that any better. It was like it was scripted, but he's like, wait, what? Lord of the Rings references?
I love that. That reminded me of a totally random story, but I wanted to make sure I had a chance to tell it today. You referenced Mean Girls a lot in your book, and so I think you're probably the only person who references it more than I do. But I had a similar kind of experience in high school. We had a Halloween dance, and it was one of the examples of there's this code and everybody seems to get it and I didn't. And so, the scene in Mean Girls where Katie shows up and she's in her full zombie bride costume and everybody else is a sexy mouse or a sexy bunny. So I was Katie in this situation. So I showed up at this high school dance And I had a full Sally costume from Nightmare Before Christmas that I had made myself, full makeup, everything. I was so proud of it. And everybody else was like a cute bumblebee or a flight attendant. And so we have this picture, I'll send it to you later, but all the girls in this group and then me at the end just looking horrifying because it wasn't a great costume. Like I said, I made it myself, but it was one of those instances where I thought, I wish anybody would just come up to me and talk about Nightmare Before Christmas, make me feel like I'm not just a weirdo who showed up at this dance completely out of place. So yeah, it's a very funny picture. I'm definitely going to send it to you later if you want to look at it, and I'll email it to you so you both that you can see it.
Nobody came up and talked to you about Nightmare Before Christmas while you're in a Nightmare Before Christmas costume?
No, I spent that dance at a table by myself.
I mean, guys, I know this isn't a video podcast, so I will describe me and Jake's faces. We look like we want to manifest time travel so we could time travel to this Halloween dance, and we'll just show up like, "Hi, Sydney, you're not going to know us for like 10 years, but we're here to help."
Yeah, that's what I needed. That's one of the things where, looking back, I don't think I was disliked. I wasn't like in the popular group, but I had a lot of friends. I didn't relate to the aspect of neurodivergence and struggling socially. I felt like I did well. But looking back, I see I had so many adults who adored me. I had lots of people who liked me but didn't really get me. And it wasn't until I was a little bit older that I felt like I made real connections with people who were kind of at the same place as me. So I don't want to put it out there that I just totally struggled in high school or was a weirdo. I feel like I did well socially, but those are those moments where I look back and think, oh, that was something I probably didn't get the code.
Oh man, and there were so many of those examples from my own life that ended up on the cutting room floor, right?
Mhm.
Because there's a nuance to that. But what a fabulous story, and I think Jake, somewhere in there is the title for this episode, right? You know,
Somewhere.
now I have the Mean Girls musical soundtrack playing in my head, and that's a very lovely gift.
Yeah, I thought about coming in and just saying, let's just spend the whole hour talking about the Wicked movie because I'm going to assume that you've seen it already.
Oh, I haven't seen it
I
yet.
haven't yet, yeah, but it was like it's like this weekend. This weekend, I'm gonna see it.
Okay, I'm going for the second time this weekend and then going again after that, but you'll have to let me know your thoughts.
We'll just have a second call where all we do is talk about Wicked.
Yeah.
Yeah, please. Seriously, it's my whole personality now.
In true neurodivergent fashion, this thing I like is now my personality.
Exactly.
I'm gonna come in green face paint, and it's gonna be like, so Sydney liked the movie.
Yes.
One of my weird areas of joy for myself is I've seen Wicked on 2 continents. I've seen it in New York, and I got to see it in London.
I love that.
And just the woman who is Glinda, who sang Popular, in this like very posh British accent, I was like, I mean, I don't stage door often, but I was like, I need to be a part of this moment. And the kids we were with were like, this was dumb. I'm like, you shut your mouth.
Yeah, it was absolutely not. There's very few things that I won't accept negative opinions on because we're all different. We all have different preferences, but Wicked is one of them. There's no negative opinions. If you're negative, you're wrong.
Yeah. Take a walk. Go on a different podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
The anti-Wicked podcast.
And then my brain's like, you can make a musical theater joke about Oklahoma there. And I was like, we're just gonna let that go. We're just gonna let it fade off into a
yeah, we get those a lot. And then Kristen Chenoweth is actually from Oklahoma, and I think that's kind of a uniquely Oklahoma thing. Is all Oklahomans know every celebrity who is from here because there's not that many.
Gosh, I love that. All 3 of us are fighting like the gravity. We have to defy gravity right now. Quickly. All right, we're going to pivot into our final questions because we're just going to start singing. And, and we didn't rehearse this, guys. Oh my gosh. Sydney, you are a delight. I mean, the clinical work you're doing is so important. I so appreciated your explanations of EMDR and trauma because, I mean, these are terms that I think a lot of people don't understand, even within the mental health community. I mean, even like licensed psychologists like, oh yeah, EMDR, woo, wavy lights.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for providing that information for us and doing it in such an accessible way. We always end the podcast by asking 2 questions. Jake, why don't you start with yours?
Ooh, I get to start. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we gotta switch it up, right?
That's fair. Sydney, my question for you is, what's your favorite word and why?
Oh, juxtaposition. I just love this idea that there are things that can kind of rub up against each other, but still go together well.
I love that. And the fact that you were so quick to say juxtaposition, which is one of my also favorite words because we use it all the time in like writing.
Yeah, I didn't even have to think about it. I was like, oh, that's the word.
It was like almost too fast. It's gonna feel like we edited it, right? And this is why I wanted to hire Jake to be an educational coach, because therapy is about juxtaposition, right? I can hold two different things in my head at the same time. Writing is about juxtaposition. Can I hold these two ideas in my head, right? I was like, you can absolutely do this work. And because we wrestled the concept of dialectic thinking to the ground. So very cool. All right. My question is somewhat less highbrow. If you could have one superhero on speed dial, who would it be and why?
Oh, that's a tough one. I would want to say maybe Spider-Man, just because he's my favorite, but also I think the backstory is very interesting. I actually wrote in my bachelor's studies, we had to do a categorical essay and categorize three things. And so I wrote about superheroes who are born with powers, superheroes who are like they have an event, they come into their powers, and then superheroes who don't actually have any powers. But yeah, Spider-Man, I think, has interesting backstory. I think he'd be able to get you where you need to go, but not too over the top and aggressive to where like Superman could like probably crush me if he tried to carry me kind of thing, you know? Accessible. He's accessible.
I think that's always been the fundamental appeal of Spider-Man, right? Is that
Yeah,
he's just a nerd from Queens.
exactly.
And I mean, as someone who definitely doesn't use humor as a coping mechanism at all, I've always appreciated that about Spider-Man, that he's like, wow, I am the least powerful person in this fight, but I'm going to quip and be an asshole. And people are going to be like frustrated. Like, why are you cracking jokes right now? You're like, hee hee hee.
And maybe that's more of what it is. He's nerdy, he's a writer, and he's sarcastic. So relatable. I get it.
Relatable content.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So, Sydney, is there anything you'd like to leave our audience with? Anything, parting words of wisdom?
Especially where they can find you.
Yeah, I have my therapy Instagram is Your Cozy Counselor, and that links to all of my more official, websites and methods of contact. Like I said, I'm licensed in Oklahoma, Missouri, New Jersey, and Utah, and I do have room for a couple new clients right now. Words of wisdom. I think my words of the year that I have had for the last 3 years, because they're working well for me, are celebrate, delegate, and reciprocate. So celebrate your wins before you move on to something else. Delegate things that you do not need to personally do. That's a really tough one for me. And then reciprocate. So find the people and the things in your life that give energy back and don't just take it.
I mean, fabulous. We need to slap that on t-shirts immediately. That'll be what that is. I mean, what a delight. What a fantastic episode. What a fantastic conversation. Sydney, you are truly a friend to the podcast and a friend to the therapy community. We'd love to have you back, and we'll just sing. We'll just sing for 52 minutes, and then we'll ask you what your favorite word is again, so we can talk about that.
Yeah, I'll show up full alphabet cosplay. Just tell me when.
We're expecting that now, just so you know.
I mean, you can't say that to us. I'll show up as Jack Skellington, right? So we can reference that. And Jake,
okay, I mean, yeah, great.
You're giving wizard right now. A little bit more Gandalf the Grey, but we could work with this.
I can go for it.
Yeah.
Love it.
The most hipster version of Fierro ever.
It'll be perfect.
I would dance through life, but that's lame.
Yeah.
I also don't dance.
Yeah. I listen to vinyls. Oh boy. Yep. So this is the podcast, fans. This is just what our brains are doing right now. But for all of us here at Nerding Out on Neurodiversity, thank you for going on the rabbit trails of our brains and talking about things that matter and things that are important, things that are going to help us change the world. Thank you for trusting us with your time and laughing with us and learning with us. It's truly an honor to share this with you. So for everybody here, I'm Dr. Matt Zakreski, your host and wearer of many hats. And I want to say a special thank you to Sydney for being here with us. And Jake, you want to say goodbye?
Yeah, just thank you everybody for tuning in. Sydney, it was amazing to meet you. Wonderful to just sit here and chat with you and get to know more about you and what you do. So thank you.
Yes, thank you guys so much for having me. I had a really good time.
That's what we aim to do. So, all right, guys, until next time, stay safe out there.
Bye, take care.
Bye.
Nerding Out on Neurodiversity is brought to you by Dr. Matt Zakreski and the team at the Neurodiversity Collective. To learn more about the Neurodiversity Collective or to be a guest on the podcast, please visit our website at www.theneurodiversitycollective.com/podcast. Audio and production by Jake Noonan. Show your support by subscribing, leaving a 5-star review, and telling your friends about us. Our Instagram and social media handles are at #NoonPodcast, NOON podcast. Your support is appreciated and keeps us going. All discussions presented on this podcast are strictly for informational purposes, awareness, and understanding. The advice presented is not and should not be considered to be therapeutic in nature. If you have any mental health questions, please contact your provider. All rights reserved.
Every minute your finance team spends wrestling with data is a minute lost. Insight Software's AI-powered insights instantly move you from complexity to clarity. Automated analysis, real-time reporting, strategic recommendations, all at your fingertips. Transform how your finance team works and watch your business grow. Stop wasting time. Start making smarter decisions. Learn more at insightsoftware.com/AI.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.